Welcome to the 19th Century Charitable Association in Oak Park, where it is our vision to be a dynamic cultural center for community learning. Good afternoon. I am Judy Eckberg, Chair of the Social Science Program Committee. Our programs committees have scheduled 29 programs in this season of our enrichment series as part of our mission to strengthen our community through learning, giving, and sharing our landmark building. Our program today is sponsored by the Illinois Humanities, a statewide nonprofit organization that activates the humanities through free public programs, grants, and educational opportunities that spark conversation, foster reflection, build community, and strengthen civic engagement for everyone in Illinois. Their Traveling Speakers Bureau, the Rhodes Scholar Speakers Bureau, supports organizations like ours by inviting authors, writers, historians, performers, and more to present free programs like the one we'll see today and share their knowledge, expertise, and passion with us. Our Rhodes Scholar speaker today is Karen J. Anderson, an artist, writer, photographer, publisher, and filmmaker. She uses a variety of methods to uplift, inform, and educate African Americans and people of color. Anderson's artwork is about life and the people who live it. The images tell stories that can inform to the way of life in the community, uplift with the beauty that comes from the community, and educate the rest of the world about the community. Karen has a Master of Arts in New Art Journalism from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Please welcome Karen Anderson.
Who am I? She kind of gave you, the list. Wrote my thesis project on the marginalization of African American beauty because it was something that I ran into a lot as I would go to museums and I would see artwork, early artwork, and there was nobody who looked like me in them. And it was like, okay, I'm just gonna keep looking. And so it was one of the things about moving to this area in Chicago where you have this amazing history that just, not just African Americans, everybody's history. And it's just so, you guys have so much information, I don't think you understand. And because when people tell me like, I'm leaving Chicago, it's just too much. I'm like, you'll be back. Because when you get to the other spaces in the country, they don't have this kind of history. They don't understand their history as well as the people in Illinois have discovered their history and celebrate it. And so I fell in love with this. I'm originally from Fort Worth, Texas. And again, I moved here to go to school. And it's like, as long as I can be here, I'm gonna be here. So what do? I am a writer, an artist, a podcaster, a filmmaker, historian, a trainer. I'm also a mom, a sister, a friend, cousin. One of my favorite cousins, Cousin Alice, 95 years old. And let me tell you, grass does not grow under Cousin Alice. Cousin Alice, because she couldn't drive anymore, she had an 80-year-old friend. And man, they would hit the streets. Because we'd be like, Cousin Alice, we're gonna come visit you. She's like, well, when you coming? Because I got stuff to do. And it was like trouble catching up with her. But I think she passed in December. And we were very sad. Because she was, really Cousin Alice was my dad's cousin. And so she'd have been my second cousin. But she was an amazing person. Let me tell you, she knew what was going on in town because she went everywhere and did everything. And I said, you know what, Cousin Alice, I'm gonna be just like you. I'm gonna keep it moving. Right? That's what I'm gonna do. And so I started writing, y'all, when I was probably about 12. because I just had so much thoughts going on and things that I wanted to say. And I've been writing ever since. Most recently, I have an article that's in a journal that was published it's an anthology published by the Black Lawrence Press called Mamas, Martyrs, and Jezebels. And that came out this year. And you could find it on their website. I just have an article in it, but it talks about how rough it is being African American and independent and trying to do anything. And I also have an article in the Chicken Soup for the Soul book, those stories, and that story is hilarious. My sister is an attorney in Texas, and she was accepted at the Supreme Court bar. And I know, we kind of mad at the Supreme Court right now, but that is a space you need to visit before they put that on lockdown, y'all. You need to go, and at least once in your life, sit in there and watch them have court. Because as an American citizen, you have that right. And there's absolutely nothing like actually being in there while they're in court. And so that's what the experience I write about in the Chicken Soup for the Soul book. And in the Roots workbook, it is the story I'm telling you right now. There are illustrations and the writing that I did for my thesis. And so it'll tell you more about the things that I wrote in the More Than a Color. The other thing I am is a filmmaker. And this is the thing I want to tell you. For you folks out there, there's something you've had on the shelf and you haven't done it. You're like, it's just not good enough, or I'm going to wait till I do this. And you've got that thing of perfection saying that when this is perfect, I'm going to submit it. Let that go. Submit it. It ain't got to be perfect. You're blocking your own blessing. I said I was going to make a feature film. And let me tell y'all, that was the hardest thing I ever did. I was like, oh my God. Halfway through it, I was like, what am I doing? But I finished it, and I started submitting it, and I submitted it to about 40 festivals, because that was the goal. You make it, you put it in festivals, and everybody finds out, how cool you are, right? I submitted this thing. I got in 2 festivals, y'all, out of 40. And it was like, all right. One was cool because it was in Oklahoma, so we could all go and see, and it's nothing like being in the audience while people are watching your stuff, and you're kind of looking at them, and you look at the screen, and you're just, did they get it? Did they get it? But the other one, it got in the Pan-African Cannes Festival. Yes, that is like one of the top 10 festivals in the world for African American festivals. I didn't get to go, but it got to go. But if I had never tried, if I had said, when those first 25 people turned me down, if I'd have said, you know what, this isn't working, and quit, I'd have never known. And you guys are sitting on some gold that you don't know you got. You better go and submit that stuff. Put that thing out there. Share that with other people. You don't know whose lives you're going to change. And speaking of change, the other thing I did was a little short called The Invitation. I currently work at the Chicago Public Access, and I teach people how to use the equipment. That's my day job. And with the class where I was teaching them how to use the camera, I was like, okay, we're going to make this little short. And they did it. I wrote it, but they did it. And once they finished it, I edited it and put it together, and I started throwing it in contests. Because that's what I do. It got into a film festival. And so these people, the first time they had done something or put this thing together, they got to go and see the results. And there's nothing like your first time out when you're sitting and watching yourself on a 75-foot screen and you got 300 or 400 other people cheering you on. And so that's what those folks got to experience. And so as you can see, we're going to keep pushing forward, right? You're going to try those things. You're going to do those things that you were scared to do, but it's going to change other people's lives. And I also do artwork. I love to draw. It was one of those things I discovered late in life that I could draw. Nobody told me when I was young. But I have also been in art exhibitions, and one of the things I'm currently doing, after I had a really great experience with Voice of the City, they did an exhibit about Pullman and just all of the different stages and the things that happened in that area. And I got to put together artwork, and it was kind of like a dream. I got to put together an artwork exhibit, and it was on display at the National Monument. And I was like, right? And so the fact that, I mean, it's not there permanently, but the fact that I got to show it there for like 6 months, I was good. And so I really enjoyed working with that organization, and so I actually have become a member of their board. And one of the things that we are doing is we are crossing over history with artwork, in that we are helping people discover their migration stories. And the folks who had lunch with me, y'all probably heard me asking questions. So when did you come to Illinois? When did your family come to Illinois? Because there's a story in the patterns and the ways that people do or come and live. And so we're helping people learn those stories so that they can pass that on to later generations, because that is important. So why or do beautiful people look like me? I think history is going to say no. But what do you think? Do you think beautiful people look like you? Good answer. So, with my people, beauty has a history of being associated with pain. For me, that association is true. So, when I was about 7 years old, and this is like back in the day, and I mean, y'all will get that. Remember like back in the day when little kids could go out and play, and we could just go anywhere and then come back, and it was really no issue. And so my mom was like, okay, you guys need to go to the beauty shop. And I don't know if it was a holiday or something, but we had to go get our hair done. And so she got us up early, washed our hair. And so me and the 5-year-old are walking. And it was like, and I was thinking, nowadays I would not have sent my child this far away. But so we had to go, and we crossed in our day, it was like a major highway to us. It was like, oh, look at all these cars. And so we had to cross that. And then we went down a hill and up a hill and down a hill and then up another hill. And at the top of the hill, it was this little shack. And this little lady sat in there, and there was not a lot of room in this shack. So it wasn't one of those things you could go in and sit down. If you went in and she had somebody else in there, she was doing their hair, you had to sit outside and wait, because she ain't had them kind of seats. It wasn't like that. And then when it was our turn, we would have to go in there, and we'd sit in a chair, and she would have a hot iron cone, and she would heat it up on open flames, and you would sit in that chair, and she would take that comb and she would pull it through your hair. And as a little kid, you're sitting there like that, and she's going, don't move, don't move. And I am sure there are all kind of burn marks in my head from where, because the thing is, she's saying don't move, but it's a hot comb, and it's still steaming, and the steam is hitting your head, and it's like, oh. But you did this because this was what beauty was. This is what beauty called for. It said if you wanted to be considered looking good or beautiful, you had to get your hair straightened. And so we had to deal with this pain of putting this hot comb on our hairs, and we just had to deal with it. That was just part of it. There needed to be pain in order to be beautiful. And so this story, we're going to challenge these ideas of what beauty is, and examine the beauty and the pain surrounding the African American image. One of the things that many discovered is that there was a code to the way you needed to look. If you wanted to accomplish or get anything done, you had to look a certain way. So if you had nappy curly hair, you had to put creams on it, you had to put heat on it. It had to look straight, because the way you looked determined what kind of job you could do. The color of your skin, whether you were dark skin or light skin, that determined your income, where you could live. It determined everything about your life. And so you did what you could do. You put creams on your face to lighten it up. You straighten your hair. You do whatever you could just to create your own livelihood, right? And so probably my biggest question, especially when I was in graduate school, is that I would look at artwork and I would say, why is our artwork considered artifacts and their artwork considered classic works of art? Who gets to decide this? And how? I mean, do ours just become artifact because they took them and so we don't know who the artist is or when they were because they just went in there and did a grab bag and didn't take the information about who created them or why? Is that why? And so, and I guess the big question is, what makes something beautiful? And who gets to decide? Is it the person who creates it or the person who looks at it? And so we will examine some of the issues around this. In 1735, there was an act put together that determined how African slaves would look. They could not have them look a certain way. For instance, they could not wear the slave owner type clothes. They did not want them looking that way. They said, bad idea. We're going to come up with a uniform for them and they must wear the uniform. Not so much that they say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're just like, can we all just make a rule and say this is what they're going to say? They made a law. And the law was binding, and if they got caught wearing those clothes, it could be taken from them. And so they had to wear the uniform, and the uniform was made of a very cheap, thin fabric. And so you have all of these things that says you can only dress like this. And I've often, over the years, just before I even knew this, wondered, man, my people are really serious about some clothes. And I mean, it's like we have our own shops. And I'm thinking, you know, like the Sunday shops, you know, like where, you know, where we go buy church clothes and stuff like that. And I remember when they were upset over President Obama wearing that tan suit. I mean, do they know what color suit that man could have showed up in? He could have had eggplant. He could have had chartreuse. He could have had, have you seen the kind of suits we wear? And I think from that thing of saying, okay, you can only wear these light blue cheap clothes, he said, you know what, when we get clothes, we're going to wear whatever we want. Because think about it, the people who made the beautiful clothes couldn't wear them because it was against the law. It wasn't just an idea to say, hey, y'all, no. It was a law that says you can't wear good clothes. And it's not just the British. The French found this out the hard way because with their legal system, one of the things that the French slaves discovered is that they could petition the government and they could barter and make deals for freedom. And many of them would because, and it's one of the things that the current administration is trying to do, and it still doesn't understand, that the people they stole from Africa, they stole because they were smart. They saw that these folks were really good at farming in a certain type of area or a certain type of land, things that they could not do over in the New World. And they said, you know what, we're going to get these people and they're going to come over here and do it. And you know what, they got those people, and those people came over here and did it and made them rich. But the thing is, these people were smart. So they bartered. They got their freedom, and of course, they were working people, so they made money. And the French colonists were upset because these slaves were walking around in better clothes and items than them. And they were like, no, we are not going to have them walk around looking better than us. And so again, they made a law in 1786 The governor created a law that said if you were a slave, you could not walk around in good clothes. You had to wear sort of a slave type clothes. And the ladies were doing all of these great ornamental hairstyles, and they had jewels in them. And they said, you can't do that. You have to wrap your hair up. We can't see. Ladies, has there ever been a law about how white women could wear their hair? I ain't never seen one. There are laws that say we can't wear, we have to wrap our head up. I was like, wow. And so you have these laws in spaces, in places, not just the British, you have the French saying, this is how you need to look. We need you to look this way. You can't look any way except what we have put on the books. And I mean, think about it. It was a law, so you could go to jail for looking some way other, just by what you would wear. And so now we're going to talk about kind of like the way these codes really affected us. Because here we are in a space that says you can't look as good as these other people, but you got to make the clothes to help them look good. And matter of fact, some of the first wig makers back during this day were people of color. So we made the wigs that made everybody look so beautiful, but we couldn't wear the wigs. So we're making all of the things that everybody's enjoying except us. But there's more. And we're going to talk about, especially as we get to the 1800s, we're going to talk about Sarah. Sarah was born in South Africa. She was a part of a tribe, and as a child, when she was young, probably about 6 years old, her mom died. But she lived in a tribe, and they were cattle herders, and they all worked as a family. And so her father remarried, and she grew up, and around when she was probably like a teenager, her dad died. But she was still in the tribe, and the tribe took care of her. And she married a man, and they had a baby. And right at the time that she was, getting ready to have this baby, the Dutch decided they wanted to come in and enslave these people. And so war broke out. And so they started, her husband goes off to war. And while he's off at war, her baby dies. And then he dies. And the Dutch take over. And she gets an opportunity. Two guys look at her and say, hey, if you will come with us for 5 years, just 5 years, you will make enough money that you can come back here and live, and you won't even be a slave. And so think about this. Young girl, I can be a slave, or I can go and hang out with these guys. I think I'm going to go and try that, all right? And so she goes off with them, and this is what they do to her. They take her to Europe, and she became nicknamed the Hottentot Venus. And they took her to places, to parlors, to, festivals, and people would come and see her. And she said the thing that got on her nerves the most is when they tried to touch her. And many of the pictures will show her as being naked, but she wore clothes, y'all. It was a thin brown thing that made it look like skin, but she still hated the fact that people wanted to touch her. And they treated her like an oddity and tried to separate her from humanity. And so think about this. You've got laws on the books that say you can't wear what us, you can't look like us. And then you got people displaying folks saying, see, these are really animals. These are not people. They don't feel like us. They don't act like us. We don't need to treat them like us. But at this particular point in time in the UK, they were saying, you know what, slavery is wrong. And so we need to free these people. This is not right. And so right at the point when she is about to be freed, the two British guys sold her to a French guy. French guy took her to France, And this guy he really thought about Africans as being more as animals. Anytime she needed a doctor, he called a vet. He kept her in a cage with all the other animals in his menagerie. And so he was not a very pleasant person. But the thought is, do I sit here in this cage, although I get everything I want, versus do I go back and be a slave for somebody else the rest of my life? Not the best choices. She died at the age of 26, which is around 1815. But at that particular point in time, the average slave lived, they said if you had a slave, you were lucky if they lived 20 years. And so if you got 20 years out of them, you're doing good. Oh, and did I mention when she died, the French put her in a museum. And for a while she was on display, but eventually they took her off of display, but they kept her at the museum. And you also have not just people who were going to the festivals and seeing these oddities, you had artists who were creating great works of art, classic works of art, who had absolutely no love for people who had dark skin. Edward Manet, who created this picture, which was the Olympia's Maid, he is known to have very many racist tendencies. And he did this one in 1865 in the Paris Salon. And one of the things you will notice, even in my fuzzy little picture here, you can distinctly see Olympia's eyes, her nose, and different features. But for the maid, which he had little respect for, it was all very muddy and unclear, because he did not think that people of color should be in his images. He didn't think they were beautiful. And as a matter of fact, one of the historians that I found said his prejudice affected his work, leaving those images dark, less defined, and he really just pointed out that there was a history of this with French artists at that time. And so I don't see them in those images in the museum because they didn't think they were worthy of that. But we had real live role models, y'all. There were real live role models of people who were being successful and doing things. It's just the stories weren't always told to that advantage. Nancy Green was born into slavery in 1834. She was in Kentucky, but she, after slavery, she moved to Chicago, where she worked as a nanny and a cook. And two friends of the people she worked for had started a pancake mill. And they said, we really want to sell this thing, but we need to put something out there that'll make people want to buy it. And they came up with the idea, said, you know what, we could get a woman to model it. And so Nancy said, I'll do it. And they said, when you do it, well, the other thing we'll want you to do is we'll go to festivals and stuff, and you can make these pancakes and sell them. And she was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. I mean, think about it. You don't have to cook and clean up after two little kids. I'm there. I'm making pancakes at the fair. Well, Aunt Jemima has been on that box for over 100 years. It was 2 years ago they took her off that box? That woman didn't make them pancakes. All she was the picture on the box, but it sold it. But it also sold a stereotype that if, there's a big fat black woman on the box, it must be good. For 100 years, this woman's face was on the box, and she wasn't related to the family who made it. But they created this type that said, hey, this is good. This is what beauty looks like for you. And then you get women like Sarah Breedlove. Sarah Breedlove was born in 1867, and it was in the Mississippi Delta. And her parents died when she was young, so she was raised by siblings. And it wasn't until like the 1880s when she moved to St. Louis and started working with her brothers, because you see, down in the Delta, and I don't know if any of you, some of you folks are from the South, and so you might remember some of these things, but down in the spaces where she was born, there wasn't running water. So any water you got, you were going and fetching that water. And if you was going and fetching water every day, you was going and fetch water to wash dishes, to cook, maybe clean up a little bit. You weren't going to fetch bath water. You weren't going fetching water to, to wash your hair and do all those things. And so because of these hygienic things, hair wasn't growing. You couldn't do like real attractive things with your hair if you had big bald spots and pieces were falling out. Also, during that particular time, and I think some of you will remember this, remember when meat wasn't an everyday occurrence? Remember when it was like, okay, we gonna have meat 2 or 3 times a week, but we not gonna have, that protein was not there. And so without that protein, again, you don't get the growth. You don't get the beautiful hair. You don't get all of the things that we kind of take for granted now. And so when she moved to the city and she was exposed to some of these things, and again, this is where I go back to that whole education thing. Folks be like, we're just going to stop education and that's going to stop people. That ain't going to stop people. Sarah Breedlove, I think she stopped school around 2nd or 3rd grade. But chemistry was the thing that really worked for her. It was something she could do, whether she had a book education or not. And when she got to St. Louis, she started working for a company. She worked for this lady, African-American lady, started her own business. Now, and I have to do my aside right here. I remember it was several years ago, I was on some business, it was an online thing, and they were talking about this guy at Amway who started door-to-door businesses in the 50s. I was like, bruh, do you not know about African American history? There's this lady named Annie Malone. She started a hair company probably in the 1890s. And what she did is she taught a woman how to do something, and then she would sell her the products to say, okay, this is how you do your hair. This is how you wash your hair. This is how you keep it clean. And then you teach other people how to do it. And she started her network like that. So by the time Sarah Breedlove had joined her organization a decade or 2 later, she was all over the United States, the Caribbean, and South America. She had people selling her products everywhere, women. And the beautiful thing is it created a network where they just stayed within their own community. But it made this woman a millionaire. And Sarah saw this and she was like, I could do this. And so Sarah would take them chemicals and she would improve on it. Because the beautiful thing about African American hair is the texture is so different. And so what works on one texture hair might not work on another texture hair. And I think Sarah saw that and she said, you know what, if I add this will help those folks with this kind of hair, and this will help folks with that kind of hair. And then everybody gets their hair the way they want it. And so Sarah started a company that did hair pressing, hair curling, and she took it to the level of not just doing hair, but to beauty items. It was like, we're gonna do makeup, we're gonna do lotions, we're gonna do all kinds of things to make these women feel beautiful. And that was her goal with the company. She says, I'm gonna make these people feel beautiful. And she created a $1 million company. And with this company, she helped fund and found the NAACP. She started beauty schools all over the country. And like Annie Malone, her company became almost international because she was in South America and the Caribbean and other spaces. And so she did all kinds of things to teach people how to be beautiful. And this is Annie. Annie, like I said, Annie was born in 1867, and she did the same thing. She grew up without parents, but one of the things that she had always wanted to do was to help take care of hair. And she helped people be beautiful. And again, another woman who became a millionaire on helping African American women become beautiful. And the cool thing that these ladies helped start, and it's one of those things that's most powerful today, is this beauty shop. Now, let me tell you, the Black Beauty Shop is an amazing occurrence. Y'all know exactly what I mean. I remember back in the day, it was one lady doing hair, but she would have 15 people sitting there waiting, and we would all wait our turn. We know it's gonna be all night. Diane got a bunch of people in here. Okay, and we get food and watch TV, but it'd be 15. And the thing is, we knew everybody's secret. We knew we know their color. We know what color their hair was when they got there and what color their hair was when they left. We knew how much hair they had and how much hair they had added on. We knew all their business, but it created this community space where you went and you got your hair done, but you also fellowshipped. It was that space of just being together and doing these things. And so let me tell you, they talk about we can stop this communication between these folks. Y'all can't stop the communication between us because we gonna always go to the beauty shop. Okay? The beauty shop is one of those things that's very consistent throughout time. You will see once these women started it, the process, and the beautiful thing about this process is it's a space where we can work in the community and continue to do all of the things that we want to do. And we don't have to worry about any of the outside things coming in and messing those things up. The other thing you would find in especially in Harlem and in these communities, is it creativity. You would see things. Remember when, I'm not saying because we was there, but because we've seen the pictures. When that Marcel wave first came out and you would see Garbo and all those folks in it, it was in Harlem first. They would see the styles in Harlem, and then the folks up on Broadway and other spaces would start imitating them. And everybody would think, oh, look what's coming out of New York. But they wouldn't tell you what part of New York it started in. And so you would have all of these creatives creating amazing stuff coming out of these beauty shop spaces. And speaking of this beauty, especially in the 1900s, oops, I'm going the wrong way. You would find beautiful, beautiful women. You couldn't see them like this. Hollywood would not let it happen. You would see people like Josephine Baker and Nina Mae McKinney. They would see these things on the screen and they'd be like, I want to do that. I want that job. And they would be like, you're kind of ugly. No, you can't do this. This is not the icon. This is not what we want for you. And so Nina Mae McKinney was the first African-American woman to get a contract. She was with MGM, and she had a 5-year contract, and she was excited. And the only thing they would let her play were maids and prostitutes. And she confronted them. She said, hey, am I ever going to get a lead role? Will I ever get to do this? And they were like, no. I mean, we got you a contract. We let you in the movies, but you don't get to play anything else. And so she got out of the contract and she headed for Europe. Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker did the same thing. She was on Broadway. She was in like 2 really big hit shows on Broadway. And it was really wild because it was a time that they didn't think black people would do good on Broadway. But then they got shows like Shuffle Along and I think it's By Blackbird. And these was in the 19s. And these shows sold out for like a year. And they said, okay, well, maybe people will go see black shows. And so Josephine was in these shows. And she's like, okay, I'm ready, for a lead role. And they were like, Nah, we don't think so. And again, she was like, well, okay, bye. And she went to France, and she became a big star in Europe. I mean, selling out, millionaire, making lots of money. And I mean, all through Europe, she is making money. And then she became such a big star that by the 30s, they were like, okay, we're gonna bring you back. We're gonna let you come back to the US and do a show. And she came back to do the Ziegfeld Follies in 1936. Fanny Brice, Bob Hope, I can't remember which Arlene it was, and Josephine Baker. Fanny Brice and Josephine Baker did the same things. They would cross their legs and cross their eyes. The critics loved Fanny Brice, hated Josephine Baker. They said that Josephine Baker was ugly, and they were absolutely surprised that anybody would ever put her on stage. She got the worst reviews she had ever gotten. And when she left, she said she was never, ever coming back. But she went back to Europe, and as a matter of fact, she helped during the war. She helped during World War II as a spy, and was accommodated to the point that when she died, they were going to put her in the Pantheon. But her relatives said no. But it was such an honor, what things that she had done. But she could not find that kind of victory here. Now, you have women like Hattie. Hattie won. But Hattie did what they told her to do. Okay? Hattie played a maid. As a matter of fact, the first African American woman to win an Academy Award won for playing a maid. And they said, Hattie, why you always playing the maid? Don't you get tired of playing the maid? And Hattie said, I would rather play a maid than be a maid. Because the truth was, while Butterfly McQueen was playing the maid on Gone with the Wind, she was actually part-time somebody's real maid when she wasn't on the set. And so the choice is, do I do what they want me to do or do I not? And this is the thing that they wanted us to be. This was our beauty. This is as high as we were going to go when it comes to beauty. Even though we had other women who looked other way, they couldn't make it. This was it. Remember the pancake lady? Remember the maid? This is it. This is success for you guys. This is the message we were being sent. But I don't have the picture, but I have to tell you, there was one lady who got over. Her name is Olivia DeFore. She was raised in Alabama, and at a certain point, because she was a very fair-skinned woman, her parents decided around 9th grade to send her to New York to live with an uncle. And so she moved to New York to live with her relatives who were fair-skinned. And so she finished high school in New York and went on to college in New York, and she could actually go to a college that did not accept people who looked like me, but they didn't know what she looked like. They didn't understand who she was, and she didn't tell them. And so she got a degree there, and then once she finished that, she went to the Vogue School of Modeling, which also didn't accept people who looked like me. But she got a degree there, and she got work. And once she graduated and got work and began working in the industry, in the 1946, she started her own modeling agency for people who look like me. And then you find this is a place where Cicely Tyson, Richard Roundtree, Diana Carroll, they all went to her school to learn how to do the things that they did. And so she took the information she had and she took it. Because again, we were still facing this thing of how you look determines what you can do. Zelda Wynne Davies wanted to be a fashion designer. When she was in seamstress school, they told her, no, you can't do that. Because of who you are, because of the color of your skin and your hair and your race, you can't be no fashion designer. You should be happy being a seamstress. She was friends with Nat King Cole and some other folks, they moved her out of that job. She started her own space off of Broadway and was able to do people. She created costumes for people like Mae West, Diana Carroll, Cicely Tyson. And so you see there was this clique thing that happened there. And you see they brought each other on along. And it changed the way we began to look and the way we were seen. Now, first African American to make the cover of Life magazine was Dorothy Dandridge. And Dorothy did it in character. She was not able to be herself on the cover of the magazine. She had to be the character she was portraying, who just happened to be a prostitute. Okay? Just happened. And the thing that gets me the most about this is that Dorothy, and this is what Donald Bogle, the media historian, says, is that she was not able to affect or touch the lives of the public or sweep them off their feet the way people like Vivian Leigh was. She wasn't gonna be able to be seen as that beautiful. And so you have women like Dorothy. Another issue we have is the color erasure. This is Marian Anderson and Queen Elizabeth. Now we know them people ain't the same tone. But when they start popping us on magazines, they're like, let's take some of that color out of there, or let's add a little in here. And so it's like, okay, Marian, you're beautiful, but you're not that beautiful. Donnell Luna, I think if you have Netflix, there is a great documentary on there that talks about her life and all of the things that she's gone through. This first African-American model on a mainstream magazine, Donnell Luna. This is Donnell, y'all. Yeah, they sucked all the color out of her. They said, okay, you can be on the magazine, but this is what you got to look like. And so what you have, especially during this time, you have a group of women who decide, we don't care what you think about how we look, we're going to change our look and be what we want to be. In New York, there was a group called the American Art Society, and that's AJAZ. They, in the late 50s, early 60s, started a thing where they would put together these fashion shows. And they only wanted African-American women who would wear their hair natural. And let me tell you, that was a fight. Now, they could do that in New York. You couldn't do that anyplace else. Because let me tell you, the biggest fight any of us sisters have ever had, especially in childhood, was walking out the house with our hair looking any kind of way. They'd be like, where you going? No, you can't wear your hair like that. You can't do that. And so you had all of these sisters who wanted to, like in the late 50s, wear afro. Oh, they had to fight their way out the house before they could do that. And so they would, say, hey, this is what we're going to do. And I remember I interviewed some guys for talking about beauty, and Mr. Gumps, he was one of the gentlemen who was a part of the AJAZ, and he's one of my storytellers. AJAZ started a movement in the late 50s called Black is Beautiful, and it was to look at folks who were putting themselves together in a natural fashion with their hair in natural ways. And they did a fashion show, and they were terrified the first time they were holding this show, because they were like, okay, we got the club rented, we got the people, we just hope folks are going to come and see this, And like he said, he was absolutely surprised the first time when he walked through that space. He was walking up to the thing, and he was like, wow, look at all of these people standing outside waiting to get in. He said they were onto something, and that people were starting to grasp it. And it was a hard thing. And let me tell you, lately, especially with the whole natural hair thing, my hair has been so much healthier since I have gone natural. And it grows at twice the rate. And I was laughing because my daughter just recently decided to do it, because she's watched me for almost like 2 decades of her life. And she's just like, I love your hair, but I don't think I could do it. And I was like, okay, well, that's on you. You can keep doing it the way you're doing it, or you can go natural. And natural has been so much easier and healthier for me. Now, I'm not like all the way natural, y'all. I still color, just because I like to. But at that particular point, this was revolutionary in the late 50s and early 60s for these folks to walk around with their hair natural. And, you know, it had to be in a space like New York City, because otherwise it was going to be a fight. Because let me tell you, there were some people who will, I have family members who will fight you over the way you look before you walk out the house. It's like, look, you are related to people. You cannot walk out here looking any kind of way. Because what do we know? Because the way you look will determine what you can do. And so Mr. Gumps was one of the folks who was the gentleman who was at the AJAS Society, and they created a space for grandiosa models. And grandiosa models were these African American things, because at that particular point in time, like remember I told you about Olivia DeFore? She was a model, but she could only do certain things, right? Which is probably why she started her agency. You'd have black artists. I mean, we've all seen, you know, like the music artists and everything. But do you remember those covers back in the day? I mean, you would have like the Temptations or one of those old, you know, groups, and they would have these models on there, and you'd be like, that ain't got nothing to do with weight. And so the grandiosa models created a space where that artists could come and say, do you want your models to look like this? We have them. And so these ladies did lots of album covers, lots of local advertising, and lots of spaces for black businesses. When you see spaces like this, do you think art? Or do you think, oh, that's just advertisement, that's just a photo, that's just, yeah. And so during this space, I talked to folks who actually work with these folks and put this together. Let me tell you, this is a big thing. Vernon Francois is a celebrity stylist, and he does, you know, Vogue, for Vanity Fair, Harper's Bazaar. He does all these things, and he works with folks making the hair look exactly the way the person wants it to look. And so he spends lots of time doing that. And Phil is so fun. Phil was the person who did Beyonce's hair thing. Phil said he remembers the day he got the call for that. He said he almost lost his mind, but he was terrified, but he got there on time and he put that thing together. And you know, it's just like one of those things, you're over in your space and you're working and you create it, and he hands it off and he's just like, you know, and then you're just waiting to hear. You know, they got it on the set because he wasn't there watching. He was over in his own space. And he said, and they came over and they said, hey, Phil. You know, when they come over and they look at you, you're going, oh, no. And they go, Phil, she really liked that. Could you make another one? And he was just like, wow, yes, okay. And so that was an amazing experience for him. But it also, you know, boomed his business so that now he could go and he could create these florals for lots of things. And Alexi is a photographer, and his stuff is everywhere. But one of the things he discovered when he first started was that whenever he was on a shoot and needed a model, they always sent him a 6-foot blonde hair, blue-eyed person. And he was like, you know, beauty comes in more shades and fashions than this. And one of the things he personally did with his own money is he created a book, and with that book, with a shoot from the book, he picked all of these diverse looking type people across that book to say, hey, this is the spectrum of what beauty could be if you go there. And so the question is, so the answer is, so what? So what now? We've talked about all of these beautiful, amazing things. Does it really matter? Because, I mean, we've just kind of gone through this history of everything. But one of the things that we discovered, 2018, For years, they kept telling us that African Americans couldn't be on the cover of magazines because we wouldn't sell them. And then one day, 2018, it was a couple of months, we were across like 10 to 12 major mainstream magazines. It was like, what happened? All of a sudden, wow, we can sell stuff now? We were blown away. We were like, all of a sudden we can do this? And then they passed they almost passed. I think it's still stuck in the Senate. The Brown Act that says, you know what, you can't persecute people because of their hair. But they still persecuting people because of their hair. You heard about the guy, the kid in Texas? 2 years. This kid's been because they don't like his locks. It's like, who has a law against your hair? I mean, my hair can't shoot you or kill you or poison you or do nothing to you, and you've got a law against my hair? And finally, when Nelson Mandela became president of South Africa, he petitioned the French government to return Sarah Baartman home. It took them 8 years. They were afraid that if they had just sent her back, that all of the African countries would start asking for all their stuff back. 8 years, but they finally sent this woman's body home so she could be buried. And so in this golden age of African American imagery, society is no longer limited to what Caucasian men think about defining African American beauty, because women can do that themselves. And it has not been an overnight journey. It has not. But the beautiful thing is, and this is what people are discovering now, is that these artists have taken their audiences, and they can take their audiences wherever they want to go. They don't need that middle stream media person to do it for them. And so now they're telling the kind of stories that they want to tell and how they want to tell it. And so the question I leave you with is, do beautiful people look like me? And the answer to that is, this is a question everybody has to answer for themselves. Thank you. I love your hair.
Thank you so much for this. My initial question was, do beautiful people look like me? And I said, of course. So my dissertation was similar to yours. Mine was an examination of the narrative of African American women and the power of voice. Ooh. And a huge part of my dissertation talked about how we see ourselves and how we are the person, the individual who decides whether or not we're beautiful, whether or not our voice is heard. And I am biracial in the sense that my mother's from Mississippi, my father's from Mexico. And when people talk about Afro-Latinas, they don't typically look like me.
No, they don't.
And so when I was younger, I had big hair, didn't need a perm, but straightened my hair all the same because I wanted that straight hair, because it was a connection to having good hair. And so the whole thing was about good hair, how long you could stay underneath the iron to make sure that your kitchen was straight so that you could have good hair longer. And so as I got older and accepting more of that Latina, Afro-American Latino mixture, I decided to lock my hair because that was natural for me. Mm-hmm. And I use my hair as a lesson. So whenever people ask me questions, I never turn the questions down. I did have some woman, when we talk about touching, she said to me, "Can I touch your hair?" You know what I said to her? "Can I touch your breast?" It is just that important to me. Just that important to me. The only thing that I feel so bad about being here today is that we don't have a lot more young people who needed to hear this message.
Yes.
You know, there are a lot of older women here, and that's great, but this needs to be some place where young people really appreciate that, because they're still following other people's ideas of what and standards of what is beautiful. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I used to have good hair.
I just want to put in a word for the barber shop. You mentioned the salon, and it's important to African American women, which is quite true. I had a dear friend named Bill Campbell, who used to be on Channel 7 as their community reporter. And he called me one day and said, "Stan, you hang out in all these different communities. How'd you like to come on? And you and I, Bill was African American, I'm obviously white, and we're going to spend 4 hours talking about barbershops." I had more fun that night than I've had in a long time. The smells, the conversation, the topics that were raised, which would never be raised anywhere else.
Right.
It was a wonderful thing. And you might say a word sometime, I understand why you're focusing on women, but men have that outlet too.
I volunteer with mostly African American teenagers, and the girls can tell do a lot, spend a lot of time on their hair, their makeup, you know, what they're wearing. And if it seems appropriate, I'll say, "Oh, you look beautiful," or I love what you've done with your hair. And to a person, they beam. I'm just wondering, is there danger in focusing on looks? Because we do as a society. Obviously, they're doing things to make themselves look good. And my thought is, it's a value to them.
It's a value to me, too. I like it when people tell me I look good.
Do beautiful people look like me? Of course. I'm tall, I'm small and petite. But also that growing up in Mississippi, in the South in the 50s, I could definitely relate when you was talking about using that straightening comb.
Oh.
My grandmother. But then there came a time for myself as I grew to realize that I didn't need a straightening comb for my hair to grow. And it does cause damage to women's hair and the scalp. It burns it. And they really don't need that. And I think when you were saying that you realize that how definite it is for your hair to be natural. And I think that is something, God made us all different.
Yeah.
We're not made to be to like, but to love each other. So I appreciated that with the color that you made, that it was really, I learned a lot, and that I can also be able to share that. So you highlighted some things that I learned, so thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was a school teacher, and negative connotations that people put out and they display, like black on black crime. Caucasian people kill Caucasian people. Asian people kill Asian people. But to hear that black people and black crime plays a negative connotation on our children. I taught primary students, and if you would even ask them, I said, "What does it mean being black?" The little boy says, "Black means I'm going to be bad." A little girl told me, "Black means that I'm ugly." It is the images that we see and portray. We're going to have to get to that we're just all human.
Yes.
Because when you have a word, when you look up black in the dictionary, it is not positive.
It is not.
And that's what needs to change. The words we use, the way we view at people, and how we fear people just because of a color.
Truth. Thank you.
Her saying was, "You have to suffer to be beautiful." as a white woman. You had to wear high heels that hurt. You had to wear an excruciatingly tight girdle. You know, we went through perms where we tried to make our hair look like your hair.
Right.
So, you know, I guess my experience was one thing, but yours, do you think that as a black woman it was 10 times worse than a white woman, or do you think there were parallels?
I think there's some parallels, but I think there's some things that it was worse because you had your mom telling you the rules. Saying, oh, this is what you need to do, or this is what you need to not do, or this is the way, you know, sort of like, these are the rules of the community and how we act. Y'all didn't share the rules of y'all community, and then so if we was in y'all's community, we was just kind of like, okay, what's she doing? What's she doing? Okay, that's what she's doing, that's what I'm gonna do. And we're trying to do it without actually knowing what the rules are. Like the girdle thing, they got a girdle on, where you get that? Oh, we can't go into them stores. Oh, let's see if we can make a girdle. You know what I'm saying? Or, oh, look at her hair. How'd she get her hair to do that? And then you go and you try to do it and you see us doing our hair some way and you go, oh, that's cute. How you do that? And you go, well, we didn't make it the way she does it, did we? And so at least you knew the rules. There was somebody to say, okay, these are these rules. Because as we're trying to work into your communities, it's kind of like, okay, I hope this is right. We weren't trying to be individuals. We were trying to be like you. Because that's the way we could get the job and keep it. Because if we came into the job and started acting like us, y'all be like, oh, we don't want that here. No, no. And you know what I hated? You know what I hate to this day? Them pantyhose. Remember when they only made them pantyhose in one color? Yes, you could be black as chocolate and got on some tan pantyhose. And then people would have it as a work requirement. I remember, I don't know if anybody ever worked for like airlines and they were like, you must wear tan pantyhose. Sir, I am 6 sides chocolate dark and you want me in some tan pantyhose? Okay. But yes, at least the pantyhose look natural on you. They ain't look natural on us. It was one color.
That little girl on the slide is also on a poster that is a piece of art done by our speaker